ورحمة الله. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam, rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakallah khair for inviting me again. Alhamdulillah, I always enjoy coming out here to MCC, especially, usually, I mean, even though there's not that many brothers so far, but usually you don't find this type of parental participation in programming. So, you know, this is something really MCC needs to be proud of, the fact that parents come out and are able to benefit from the various different type of speakers that come. So inshallah, I hope you'll be able to benefit from my talk today. Originally, when they first approached me, I had a different topic. I was going to talk a little bit more directly to youth development and talking about like how to have that puberty talk. That was going to be that was my original topic, and I'm still going to do that online. So I just want to show you quickly where you can find that, inshallah, because I know that's still of interest. And then I have another talk that's going to come after that about what happened to my teen. Like, my little kid was like this, and then all of a sudden they're like this. Like, what? What happened? Like, an alien came and abducted him, and they dropped this other kid. They look like him, but like, you know, what's going on here, kind of a thing. So those are upcoming, inshallah. So I just wanted to show you real quick again where you can find that. I have a consulting and kind of like online education business, or whatever you want to call it, called Open Mind Services, and the website is there, www.iopenminds.net. And just real quick, so just so you can see where you can find these things I was talking about. So this is the general website. If you go on the blog section, you can look at some of the things that I've done in the past. So ways to avoid extremism, and there's a whole series on youth development. So you can look on there, inshallah, different topics and things like that. I also have a class on the U.S. government and Islam. So I'm a historian also. So I kind of show the connectivity between the Constitution and Islam, the maqasid and things like that. So it's actually like a course for older students, inshallah. So that's one thing you can do. And then my YouTube channel also, you can see all the videos there also. So if you want to kind of see what's coming up, like I said, those talks that I have coming up, you can just go to the main website and join the email list so that you'll get updates as to when those come out. Or also you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and be able to see those as well, inshallah. So, and I do other stuff, teacher training and things like that, inshallah. So, so just to go to the topic today. So the reason why I switched is, you know, with all the stuff that's going on nowadays, and the responses and counter responses to a lot of the rhetoric that's out there, I think it's very valuable for us to kind of, and anytime I try to teach, whether it's history or anything dealing with that, I have a degree in history and sociology and a master's in education. So I try to give context, because I think a lot of times when we learn about things and we try to deal with certain situations, we don't understand context. We just see what's in the moment and don't know the background. So when you react only based on what you're seeing in the moment, we could be making mistakes, actually. So I think for a lot of us, especially those of us that weren't raised here, and even for those who are raised here, that, you know, you go to public school or whatever, the history that they give you is his story. It's not necessarily history, like what actually happened. Sometimes they kind of change stuff up. So we need to really do our own investigation and really get to the root of what's going on, again, to give us some context and understanding, so that then we can base a strategy off of that. So again, you'll see a little bit more of what I mean as we go through the talk today, inshallah. So basically what I want to do is kind of give a brief outline of the struggles of the Black American community here in this country, because I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from that. Number one, we benefited greatly from the struggle and continue to benefit. And I don't think we adequately give the credit and show the appreciation that we should in the Muslim community towards the African American community. So that's number one. And then also just to teach us some strategy and to get some understanding, again, of some context. And then secondly, I want to kind of touch, and this is a crash course, it's 1 hour, so there's no, I can't go too in depth in this. But also give a brief history of Islam in America, because I think a lot of times we assume that Islam in America started when immigrants started coming, and it's not true. So inshallah, I want to give some context to that as well, so that we can kind of get an understanding of that. And I think having an understanding of the two as adults and then alhamdulillah we have some of the youth here too. But for us, once we have a good grip and a grasp of that, then we can project that to our children so that they can feel comfortable with who they are and their identity, right? Because most of the time there's this kind of in their mind, I'm from here, this other country, and I'm from this country, I'm from America. And sometimes they think it's an either or how does it look? And if it's in the middle, is it a 60-40 thing? Is it a 50-50 thing? And, I think having, again, a good understanding of all of this will help with that, inshallah. And then at the end, just kind of framing all of that and saying, okay, what is our role and responsibility as Muslims in America, as a minority and whatnot? And then, inshallah, some resources for everybody for future reading, inshallah. So to begin, inshallah. Bismillah. So just, again, this is really quick. All right? There's books and volumes written on a lot of this stuff. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the struggle, the struggle of the Black American here in the United States. There was obviously slavery, and estimates range from 20 to 30+% of those slaves were Muslim. 20 to 30% of those slaves were Muslim. So in that sense, one thing for us to know and realize is that, number one, there were Muslims in this country before this country existed. Okay, so when they say we don't want you here or you don't deserve to be here or any of that stuff, we were here before there was a here. Okay, before there was a thing called the United States of America, there were Muslims. And so in that sense, not only do we belong here, we didn't even ask to come here, we were forced to be here. So that's one thing to for everybody to keep in mind is that, yes, we not only do we not have to ask you to be here, we're here and you have to kind of like it, whether you like it or not. We're here. Okay? So the verbiage that we use should not be apologetic, and that should be, oh, please accept us kind of a thing. Is we're here, you have to deal with it. This is your problem, not our problem. It's your problem that you don't accept us. It's not our problem that we're not accepted, right? We have to flip the discussion, okay? And this again is empowering to our youth when they think, oh, I shouldn't be here. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Am I an immigrant? What's going to happen to me? All this kind of stuff goes in their mind, and they think themselves less than their fellow American, when it's really the other way around, right? I'm an American. And just like everybody else, I don't have to ask you permission for that, right? Who are you to be giving me permission to be an American? So we need to, again, we have to make sure that we frame things and understand. So number one, again, that Muslims were here from the beginning. Number two, they helped build this country. Free labor. Free labor helped, establish the superpower. Right? So when it comes to tobacco, when it comes to cotton, when it comes to all the things that helped build this country initially, could never have happened if it wasn't for the free labor, that 20 to 30% of it was Muslim labor. So when they talk about economy and, what immigrants are burden on the economy, all this kind of stuff, well, okay, then you're going to pay back all those people for the free labor that they did and their generations that come afterwards for reparations as well? So again, we need to frame things properly. And again, there's only so much I can get into. If you actually look at the words of John Adams, for example, the words of Thomas Jefferson, when they were crafting their constitutions in Massachusetts and Virginia, respectively, they mentioned Mohammedans specifically as being welcome in this country. So those are the founders of our country saying that Muslims were open to being here. So you can't say, oh, the founders never intended. Yes, they did, and they said it, but explicitly. And President Washington, when he was building treaties with the Barbary pirates in North Africa, right? The Berber pirates in North Africa, when he was talking to them in a letter, he clearly states, United States is not a Christian country. The United States is not a Christian country. Okay, United States is a secular country. It's not a Christian country. Okay, so this idea that, this is a Christian nation, Judeo-Christian stuff, they just threw Judeo in there. It wasn't even, they used to hate the Jews too. Right? So let's be clear about, about this. They're framing things, they're changing things around to manipulate. But a lot of this is able to happen because we do not know our history. right? We're always talking about STEM stuff. Science, technology, engineering, math, right? And we don't know our history. And history and language are the two most important things when it comes to empowerment. Because you can know these arguments and you can bring them out, right? Those are the things that allow us to be an effective check on whoever is trying to take our rights away. So yeah, you can get a nice job being an engineer, but if you don't know your history, you don't know your rights, you can be kicked out of the country or you can be repressed or whatever because you don't have this understanding. So we have to put an equal amount of emphasis on understanding history and then being able to communicate that through language. So fast forwarding, we have the first major issue of importance after the idea of slavery, which was the emancipation, the freeing of the slaves, right? During the time of the Civil War by President Lincoln. Now, this obviously shook the institutions here in this country, and immediately there was a response. And the response was a war. I mean, it all happened, around the same time, but for the most part, as the states continued to go west, and they were debating whether it should be free states or slave states, right? This fight and this battle started happening in the government, and then you have this big war, the bloodiest war in our history, the Civil War, right? So the response was actual states leaving the Union, right? And this is one of the crazy things. Again, knowing your history, right? Certain people get upset when they see African Americans, for example, not standing for the anthem, and they say, "Oh, this is unpatriotic," but they're walking around with Confederate flags. A Confederate flag is a rebel flag. It's a treasonous flag. Yet they want to call themselves patriots, holding a treasonous flag, a flag that was a rebellion against the government, right? But they want to talk about who's patriotic and who's not patriotic, right? But if we don't understand our history, we don't understand these things, then we can't have good dialogue and discussion, to show and to show the hypocrisy sometimes of the situations that are around us. So then, if we move to the next major phase, so the reason I'm bringing this up is that whenever there's a progress, there's always a response. Whenever there's a progress, like the freeing of the slaves, there's always a response. There's a counter response, right? But it's moving in a better trajectory. This is the blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? So even though there seems to be resistance, it's still moving in a positive trajectory. So the second issue was Reconstruction. So right after the slaves were freed and right after the Civil War was ended, the African American community gained seats in the Senate and in the House of Representatives immediately. They exercised the right to vote. They became extremely powerful. They had more representatives in the 1800s than now. They opened businesses. They owned land. They progressed very quickly. And I really want to emphasize this because I know very frequently in the immigrant community, they're always criticizing the African American community. Why don't they just get a job? Why don't they work harder? We came here. It was difficult for us. Look at us now. We have all these nice houses and stuff like that. Get off of welfare. There's a lot of discrimination in that regard in our community. What they fail to realize are the responses that helped stop. Again, when African American community had the full freedom, right after the Civil War, they excelled extremely quickly. They opened institutions of higher learning. Again, they joined the political process and they won in the South. In the South. But the response came. The Ku Klux Klan was formed to stop people from voting. They would actually intimidate or kill people if they were trying to vote. They changed the laws and made voting rules very difficult. Voter suppression. Right? They did redlining, so certain people weren't allowed to purchase property in certain areas within this red line, these red boundaries. There's gerrymandering, which is also a way of minimizing the power of certain constituencies by, they're minimizing their numbers so that their, political party or whatever wouldn't win. Okay, so there were numerous ways, systematic ways, that prevented the African American community from continuing to progress. So immediately after this, again, positive step of Reconstruction, you had the Jim Crow South with segregation and all these, again, voter laws and intimidation, murder, lynchings, all this kind of stuff happening to get in the way. Then you started seeing just disappearing, businesses disappearing, politicians disappearing, everything. It became then systematically nearly impossible for them to excel. That's why African Americans are in the situation that they're in now. It's a systematic issue. It's not because they don't work hard enough. So we need to get that straight and understand, again, the history before we criticize people. So then we move forward. But again, you had a little bit of a greater trajectory. Then you have the civil rights movement. Right? The civil rights movement. So, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. And you had a lot of the pseudo-Islamic movements coming up. And we'll talk about that, a little bit later on. But what was the response? Again, we're seeing positivity. Slavery gone away, better. Reconstruction, organization, better. But response, right? They're trying to stop it. Then you have civil rights, better. Not best, but better, right? What happens? Again, surveillance, FBI surveillance, right? Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you have assassinations that occur all across, right? Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all assassinated. You have other people who are involved in the civil rights movement who mysteriously died. So there's a lot of things going on. Official, not official, who knows? Allah knows best. But the bottom line is there was a response. Again, there's always a response. But again, the trajectory is getting better. No matter what, the trajectory is getting better. And I'm mentioning this so that we realize that whenever there's progress, there's a response, but there's still progress. So it's still hopeful, even though there's a response, right? So what's the last phase? A black president. Whoa, the White House has a black man in it. They went crazy. They went crazy. And what's the response? Right? Tea Party, Donald Trump, right? This is the response. We've seen it happen before. What's happening right now is not unique. This is basically what I'm trying to get at. What's happening now has happened throughout our history. We've seen a lot of progress when it comes to civil rights and social liberalism and things like that. Some things that obviously Islamically we don't agree with. But in a lot of ways, it's much more welcoming than it's ever been in this country. But then the straw that broke the camel's back is that you have a black man. He's not even all black. He's half and half. And it still was too much. Raised in Nebraska. Right? Obama's raised in Nebraska. Oh, even that is still too much. Black guy in the White House. Right? So what was the response? You see what's happening now. Right? White supremacist group coming up. They want to make it sound nice and say alt-right. It's not alt-right. It's white supremacists. So let's use the right terminology. Don't say alt-right. Because it legitimizes who they are. They're not part of the political spectrum. They're not right or left. They are extremists. So they want to call us extremists. Let's use the proper terminology, right? So they are extremists, white extremists. And there's also, other extremists that are out there. But again, we need to understand the context. So again, though, forget the politics of it. Electing a black president was huge for this country. Whether you agree with Obama or don't agree with Obama, I'm not here to say plus or minus on that. But again, it's progress, but the response. Okay? Progress, but the response. This has happened before. It's going to keep happening. This is the struggle. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. Right? If we call ourselves believers, do you think that you're not going to be tested? Right? So anytime there's progress, there's going to be resistance by those who don't want the progress. That's okay. That just means that now we have a job to do to continue the progress. So they can bring whatever they want. We're not going to be quiet. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue to progress. I mean, that just has to be, the mentality that we have. So just, again, in a nutshell, we can see here that struggle after struggle after struggle, the struggle does lead in a positive way. And for us as Muslims, we can expect even greater progress if our intentions are correct and our actions are correct. Right? If our intentions are correct and our actions are correct, it's not only that justice will be served, but we have Allah also to send His support to even make things happen faster. So we can't cower and be worried. We cannot, stay quiet. We have to be out there. So, and we have to instill this in our children as well, because a lot of them are nervous and scared, and rightfully so, right? We've seen, when Musa alayhi salam was in front of Fir'aun and the magicians came and they threw, he stepped back a little bit. These are natural responses. But when he was reminded and was reassured of the help of Allah, he came back and he continued. He didn't stop and run. He continued and he pushed. And then you saw, now Egypt, subhanAllah, Muslim country. Right? So there's no reason none of that stuff can happen nowadays. So inshallah, again, this to kind of encapsulate the struggle and see that progress comes, with progress comes resistance. So we have to resist the resistance in the end, inshallah. Now for us as Muslims, okay, and I touched on a couple of these things moving forward. One of the books that I would really encourage everybody to read is from Dr. Sherman Jackson, Dr. Abdul Hakim Jackson, who's a scholar. He used to be at the University of Michigan, and now he's at University of Southern California. MashaAllah, he's very well versed in Arabic language and Islamic law and things like that. But he wrote a very good book about Islam and the Black American, and then Islam and the problem of black suffering. It kind of gives you. I'm taking some of his thoughts here, inshallah, to do a quick synopsis of Islam in America, so we can kind of understand a little bit. So he describes three waves of Islam in America. So the first wave, again, is African exploration. So actually, even before slavery, there's growing evidence that African Muslims traveled here by boat before Columbus. And there's a lot of evidence from archaeologically in Mexico and things like that. They found statues that looked very African features and things like that. The big heads of the Olmecs, for example, if you look it up, the Olmec civilization, they have these big heads that they're famous for, and they look African. I mean, they straight up look African, and just different terminologies and things culturally that there's a lot of evidence. And even in Columbus's memoirs, when he landed in one of the islands here in the Americas, he said that he saw a ship and there were women with their faces covered. So very likely, they could have been Muslims as well from the other ship that was already here, subhanAllah. So there was that wave of African exploration, Muslims, and then slavery, as I mentioned before. 20 to 30% of the slaves that were brought are estimated to have been Muslims, and the majority of the slave revolts were led by Muslim slaves. So whether it was in Brazil or whether in Hispaniola, there were some different slave revolts. Many of those were led by Muslims. They spoke Arabic to each other so they can hide their plans. They continued to learn Quran and things like that until, obviously it was, either beaten or killed out of them eventually through time. But Islam, African Islam was very strong here in the Americas. So that was the first wave, right? That was the first wave of Islam in America. Then you get the second wave, as I mentioned, of what he calls the pseudo-Islamic movement. So for example, the Nation of Islam, right? We know they're not Muslim, because they believe in crazy stuff. Human being came down, and Allah came down in the form of a human being, and then there's another prophet after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They believe in a mothership, that has all the famous black leaders, and it's gonna, crazy stuff. Okay, but two very positive things came out of that movement. Number one was Malcolm X. Okay, and well, actually, one A and one B. You had Malcolm X, and then you had Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, rahimahullah, for both of them, who came to Sunni Islam later in their life, okay, and brought the vast majority of those in the nation to Islam. So you have that movement, and the second benefit of that movement and the mentality that they had was it was a very community-centered, community-based, community-uplifting mentality that they had. So when they were building institutions, they were building masjids, they built schools, they built businesses for empowerment. They didn't want the government. See, the moment that you rely on government to give you things, you become a slave to the government. Right? So you got to be careful what you ask for. Like, give us this benefit, give us this benefit, give us this benefit. But then if you rely on that benefit and the government all of a sudden says, we're going to take those benefits away, then all of a sudden now you're weaker. They had a different mentality. They said, we don't need you. We're going to build for ourselves. So we're going to educate ourselves. We're going to open our own stores, our own businesses. We're going to teach each other. We're going to use our own money. We're going to cycle our own money within the community. So they had this kind of mentality. They offered, like domestic violence courses, drug rehabilitation, things that benefited the community. They dressed nice. They spoke well. So there was an empowerment. So it was attractive to the community because of the benefit that it brought and just the aura that it brought. And many of us as Muslims have benefited from this for generations. That, especially if you lived in the city. If you lived in the city, a sister wearing hijab automatically got respect. Automatically got respect. There'd be, guys in the corner could be cussing and everything else, messing around, drinking, gambling, whatever. And then they see a Muslim sister with hijab, they would stop out of respect because of the legacy. Because of the legacy of these movements. They respected that. To them, Islam was about making things better. It was about respectability, about dignity, about empowerment. So they respected that, right? We've lost some of that since 9/11, a lot of that, and in some of these upcoming phases. So we, now we're kind of realizing we need to kind of go back to that a little bit, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that second wave was a huge wave, okay, where the African American community and to some lesser extent, some, Latinos and other Americans started converting to Islam during this second wave. And then you have the third wave, which was the immigration. Okay? Starting around, 50s and 60s, you started getting, an influx of immigrants to the United States for various reasons, whether it's for education, but a lot of it was for jobs, high-skilled jobs and things like that. You had a lot of people coming during that time, during this third wave. And from there, you started seeing other institutions starting, MSAs, and then you get ISNA, and then you get a lot of the other organizations starting to, and then you get these bigger masjids and other schools and things starting to establish themselves, as time progressed from the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, right? So you have these three major waves. Now, what ended up happening, and this is just my analysis of the situation. Alhamdulillah, I was able to become Muslim before 9/11, so I was able to experience both a little bit. And being that I'm a convert, I'm Latino, but I'm not black, and I'm also not an immigrant, people felt comfortable talking to me on both sides. So I got to hear a whole lot of stuff, right? And try to be a voice of reason on both ends. Again, this is before 9/11, alhamdulillah. I remember some immigrant brothers telling me, like, why are the African American brothers and sisters so angry all the time? Why are they always so angry all the time? Before 9/11, right? Then 9/11 happened and the Patriot Act, and now Trump, and they realized why they were angry. Right? Now you all realize why everybody was angry. Because of the amount of discrimination and the systematic ways that it felt like you had roadblock after roadblock after roadblock smacking you in the face. And you're trying hard, you're trying to be good, and you're trying to do everything the right way, and it's still roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And not only are there ones that are already built in, now they're putting new ones in the way. Right? So now all of a sudden, we have the immigrant community that cares about civil rights. They didn't care about civil rights before 9/11. CARE was struggling before 9/11. What do we need care for? Well, we needed it before. We always needed care. Black Muslims were always going through hard times, civil rights issues, but nobody cared. After 9/11, all of a sudden we care, right? So we need to kind of understand that, look, a lot of the indigenous Muslim community that established a lot of these really wonderful institutions and had built these great relationships with their city communities, a lot of that started to fizzle out because they didn't have a lot of the overseas training. They didn't have a lot of the Islamic training. They were just doing what they knew, with some of the little bit of knowledge that they had. They tried to maximize on the little bit of knowledge that they had. Then they started seeing their brothers and sisters coming from overseas who had more knowledge. And they were bringing imams from overseas, from Azhar and from Medina and from many places. And mashallah, they had a lot more knowledge. So they kind of acquiesced. They allowed for the immigrant community to kind of take more control of the Islamic movement in America. But what kind of got lost in that is that the goals of each group is a little bit different. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but they're different, legitimately different, right? For me, my parents, everybody in my family is not Muslim. Nobody in my family is Muslim. So my thoughts and interests and about Islam and its purpose is a little bit different. For me, it's like, okay, my people need Islam. Like, they're suffering with all these issues. They need Islam. I see the beauty of Islam. They need Islam, right? And the African American community, the same thing. So they felt the need to go into the community and actually help, because those are their people. That's their mother. That's their uncle. That's their cousin that's going through all these issues, right? When the immigrant community came here, it's a little bit different, legitimately different. I'm not saying, again, bad or worse. They're coming here. They have, for many people initially, this was kind of a temporary thing in their minds, right? We're coming to school, then we're going to go back. We're making some money, we can send it back, and then we're going to go back later on, right? This was kind of like a refugee spot, like a stopover. And back home was back home. This was not home. They didn't call this home. There was back home. This is where I am right now. But think of the difference, right? For me, I have no other home but here. I mean, even if you kick me back to Puerto Rico is probably the United States, right? I have no choice but to be an American. So back home, there is no back home but home here, right? But there's a back home for other people. And when you have that mentality, your level of interest in improving the situation here is different. All the sadaqah went back home, right? Anything, a lot of the work went to preserving my cultural identity here. So the masjid was kind of made, not just for salah, but it was more for like cultural protection from all the other stuff that's going on, from all those other people. I want to protect myself and my family from all those other people. Well, for me, those other people are my people. You see the difference? So then what was established and what was a priority shifted, right? It shifted to something different. And again, because there was a need for those differences, but what ended up happening, again, in my opinion, just from kind of critically analyzing history now, is that we failed to build or maintain those relationships that we had before with the outside of the Muslim community. Right? We lost some of that relationship, especially outside of the inner cities. We didn't have any connection with our neighbors. We didn't have any connection with the outside community, right? So they didn't know us. They didn't know us. And then what happens, 9/11. And because they didn't know us, right? A lot of them didn't even know that their doctor is a Muslim. Right? They didn't even know that, right? But they didn't know us at all because our contribution to the greater community was minimal, if not zero. So that then, when 9/11 comes, thank you, they now are getting fed what Islam is, as opposed to already knowing what Islam is. See, if we had been engaging from the beginning, they would know what Islam is about. They would have seen the contribution of Muslims clearly. And they would have advocated on our behalf for us. When some of these, news media started putting out the craziness about Islam and terrorism and fundamental this, the people would have spoken and said, wait a minute, I know the Muslims. They have a clinic. I know the Muslims. They do, educational reforms and tutoring. And I know the Muslims. They do, whatever. They help the homeless and the poor. And they do, counseling. We know them. This is not that. And it would have been shut down early. But because they didn't, it opened the door for the multi-million-dollar Islamophobic industry to pump nonsense to the greater American community. And there was nobody who really knew us well enough to speak on our behalf. We started to speak up a little bit, and then we started caring about civil rights and stuff like that. And it woke us up a little bit, and we started to improve a little bit more, right? But we didn't have those Abu Talibs, right? Abu Talib was not Muslim, but he spoke on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ. The Muslims needed Abu Talib. They needed Abu Talib. Of course, they had Allah, right? But they needed some of those Abu Talibs. There's no way the civil rights movement would have been successful if it wasn't for many white Americans supporting it as well, right? You need some within the dominant community to speak on your behalf. And this is one of the beautiful things we're starting to see more and more now. It took a Trump for that to happen. This is kind of the blessing of it, right? How many of us, before we go to the airport, we're scared to anybody know we're Muslim? Whoever they're like, And I've had a lot of bad incidents. My wife has had a lot of bad incidences in the airport, of people saying stuff, doing stuff, from just crazy stuff, people cussing at me, all kind of stuff, right? You go to the airport now, and you're praying there, and everybody protecting you, and they're taking pictures and posting on Facebook. You're a Muslim, everybody's smiling at you. A Muslim in the airport, people smiling at you. Wow, when would we thought that would ever happen? But why is it? It's not because there was a bunch of Muslims there. It's because a bunch of non-Muslims there that were speaking on behalf of Muslims, right? But it shouldn't have to take crisis-level situations for that to happen. Allah's in control of everything, though. SubhanAllah. So now, as we saw before, you had the struggles, you had the resistance, right? But look at what's happening. You have this massive movement of support. Allah says that that the help of Allah will come from every angle you would never imagine, from in front of you, from behind you, from the sides, and from every angle. SubhanAllah. From places we never would have imagined. Just the other day on C-SPAN, I'm listening to C-SPAN, and they were discussing the immigration ban. And the host of the event was Paul Wolfowitz. And I don't know if you remember Paul Wolfowitz, neocon during the Bush administration, right? Supporting bombing everybody up, right? He was speaking out against the immigration ban. Paul Wolfowitz, who would ever thought that Paul Wolfowitz would be speaking against the, crazy stuff. What's her name? Was was it Albright or one of these other ones too? Yeah, Madeleine Albright, right? This is un-American. Like, wow, really? You too? Like, wow. SubhanAllah. Allah's in control of the hearts. Allah's in control of the hearts, right? We have to do our part, though, to avoid as much of the crisis as possible. Like, we're not wishing for a Trump situation to happen, obviously, right? Because it's a mess. It's a disaster for everybody. We're the laughingstock of the world right now. Right? It's really great, like really, really great situation. But trust me, it's really great, right? Like that's the level of English that we have from our president right now. But again, what are we doing in the meantime? And again, this is the purpose of, for me, why I thought this talk was so important, is that we get an understanding, we feel a motivation, and then we instill this also in our children, in our youth. They're the ones who have the time, right? They have the time, their disposable time. A lot of them have disposable income. They're the ones who can go out to the airport and protest and stuff like that, right? So let them go. We have to encourage, but at the same time, us as the adults, we're the ones who can give the money. We're the ones who can do the voting. We're the ones who can appeal to legislators, right? We're the ones who can help support the clinics. We're the ones who can help start, the homeless shelters. We as the adults, as the elders, have to be more supportive of this. The other one, the young ones, they're the ones with the passion. They're going to be out there doing stuff. Let them do that. Let them do that. But the real nitty-gritty work has to come from us. It's a full team effort here. We have to do coalition building and whatnot. So, again, now we find ourselves in this post 9/11 situation. We know the history now. We know what worked. What got us some level of status in the community. We need to try to re-establish that a little bit. And again, we're starting to see that. We're starting to wake up. Again, we need wake-up moments in our history. And don't forget, this is not the worst that Islam has faced either. Right? We've had crusades. We've had Mongols. We've had inquisitions. We've had all kinds of situations happen throughout our history. Right? I'm sure during the time when the Mongols came and 1 million people died in a day, and they destroyed Baghdad, that they thought that the day of judgment was coming. Literally, I'm not even joking about that. I'm sure they thought that this is the worst thing that the Ummah will ever face, right? And that the Dajjal is going to come soon. I mean, it was like Ya'juj and Ma'juj coming, right? We're not even close to that. We're not even close to that. But look what happened. Again, we had a resurgence. Look what happened after Crusades. We had a resurgence, right? So there's no reason why that can't be the situation now. But the difference, or what's really going to happen is, what is our reaction to these situations? Right? They didn't fold back. They didn't quiet down. They continue to strive. They continue to teach. They continue to practice. They took pride in their identity more. And they worked for the sake of Allah. And then Allah brought the victory. So we have to take the same type of mentality again and then instill this in our children, inshallah. So, one of the things we need to really keep in mind is that both ease and hardship are tests from Allah. Both ease and hardship are a test from Allah. There was a time when things were easy here. People didn't know about us as Muslims, but we were doing okay. We had our stores, we had our doctors' clinics. Nobody was messing with us. We weren't messing with anybody. Right? Everything was all good. Right? We thought so. But that ease was a test. Because we weren't giving dawah. This is a duty on us. It's not something nice that we can be telling people about Islam. It's not like a favor. This is a duty. Right? It's not nice that we are feeding the homeless. This is a duty. It's not nice that we're speaking against, domestic violence. This is a duty, right? We need to realize these are our responsibilities, not just favors that we're doing for people. Okay? So, because during our time of ease, we weren't really involved that much in that type of stuff, we failed the test. And it's easier for us to come back to Allah during times of hardship. Allah mentions in the Quran that, the example of the people on the ship, that when the storm is coming and knocking the ship around and they think they're going to get thrown overboard, that they come back to Allah. But that then when they're safe on the shore, they forget again. The test a lot of times is during the time of ease. So we need to make sure that, when we have times of ease, that we are stepping up and passing that test. It's not only in times of hardship. Again, so when things calm down, inshallah, and they'll calm down soon, inshallah, will we go back to doing nothing? Or will this be a true wake-up call for us to say, you know what? I realize my responsibility, and from this point forward, I'm going to continue fulfilling that responsibility and not pass it off. Oh, the masjid should be doing that. The imam should be doing that. The Sunday school principal should be doing that. You guys do it. You. What about me? We all have a role and responsibility. All of us, inshallah. So that's number one. Number two, knowing that the history, our role and responsibility needs to be supporting all movements that call to justice, mercy, and compassion. Justice, mercy, and compassion. Right? This keeps us grounded. It keeps us, that ummatul wasata, the middle nation, not being extreme, that we don't react in ways that go beyond the bounds of what is acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One extreme or the other. The one extreme of, okay, everything's okay, that's an extreme position. No, not everything's okay. We're Muslims, we have principles, right? But on the other side, not to the crazy extreme that trying to force people to do stuff, there's no compulsion in the religion, right? We're in the middle. So, we need to make sure that we're aligning also with any of these types of groups, inshallah, that we don't compromise our principles with, but that are calling towards justice, mercy, and compassion, inshallah. And use all moral means available to help those in need, regardless of their religious affiliation. As a duty. I remember one time, if those of you who know Imam Johari, Abdul Malik from Dar Hijrah, he's the outreach director there. He's on TV a lot and things like that. I remember one time I was giving a talk at MIST, and he was also. And we knew each other from before. So he came to me, and he said, Brother Jose, I'm going to be starting this initiative. This was years ago. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was something, in terms of like helping, I think it was the poor or something like that. And I responded and said, oh, what a great way to give dawah. And he's like, no, this is not about dawah. This is what we're supposed to do. Whether people become Muslim or not has nothing to do with it. Our duty is to help people. It's not about trying to trick them into becoming Muslim. It's about doing our duty and our responsibility. They're going to become Muslim anyway. That's in Allah's hands, right? As long as we should show them that the reason our intention is because we want to please Allah and things like that. But it doesn't always have to be this direct, knocking people over the heads, with Islam, you got to become Muslims type of a thing. We're doing this because this is what we do. We're Muslims. This is what we do, right? Thirdly, realize that the sunnah of Allah is gradualism. Things take time. And especially nowadays, we want instant gratification. We want like the super fast internet. We microwave stuff. Everything's got to be fast, right? Everything's fast, fast. We want it right now, right now, right now. It just doesn't work that way. And one of the signs of us as being true believers is that we have patience, that we trust in Allah's plan. That doesn't mean we don't do anything. That means we're doing things, and we continue to do things, and we continue to try to change. We continue to try to progress. We continue to struggle and try to push for positive change. But whatever the end result is along the way, that's in Allah's hands. That's the qadr of Allah. So things sometimes, maybe it's not the right time yet. We think it is, but Allah knows better. So it's not about our time. It's about Allah's time. In the meantime, we're working hard. In the meantime, we're working hard. So maybe this changes quickly. Maybe it takes longer. But we still keep working. We cannot, lose hope and lose sight of any of that, inshallah. And realize that Allah changes conditions of those who change themselves. As we know, so inshallah, we have to work. We have to work. We have to instill this, again, in ourselves. We need to model this for our youth and encourage our youth. A lot of times we're the ones who get in the way. I had mentioned this before in one of the other talks, is that our youth are very enthusiastic. They want to try this, want to try that. And we sometimes get in the way. Say, oh, that's not realistic. You can't do that. You don't know what you're doing. We get in the way. Like, okay, let them try. Even if they fail, so what? They're young. Like, it's not life and death situation, right? If they want to start whatever, a food pantry or something like that, let them start. Even if it lasts 2 weeks, inshallah, they're still going to get the reward from Allah if their intentions are correct. And at least they gain some experience, and they've been able to get that spirit of helping others in a society that teaches individualism. The fact that they even show any concern whatsoever towards other human beings is a beautiful thing. Encourage that. Don't get in the way of that. Again, even if they make some mistakes. Now's the time for them to make mistakes, so that when they get to our age and they're in charge of the masjid or they're in charge of businesses or whatever, they've already learned a little bit along the way. Too many of our masjids are led by people that have no idea how to do anything, and they're making mistakes on the job, and it's hurting the community, right? So why not train the younger generation so that they can move in that direction, inshallah. So again, I hope that this is a crash course. Obviously, there's details and much more that could be said on all these different aspects. So I hope it was, inshallah, of some benefit. Just other things that you can read on. Again, my website, I have some information on there, eyeopenminds.net. The book that I had mentioned to you, again, from Dr. Abdul Hakim Jackson. You'll probably, if you do a search, it'll be under Sherman Jackson. He's very famous. He's ICNA and all the other conferences and things like that. Islam and the Black American. And then Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah, he's probably one of my favorites. He wrote a very good article called Islam and the Cultural Imperative. It really encapsulates a lot of the things that we're kind of discussing today. And he, mashallah, I think he's a professor at University of Chicago right now. He's a white American convert. Mashallah, he's very well versed in Islamic sciences as well, mashallah. And he used to have an institute called the Nawawi Institute. So you can look up a Nawawi Institute or, again, Omar Farouk Abdullah. Inshallah, jazakumullah khair. We can open up for Q&A, inshallah.